President has a... Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new hour of America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shawn.
And I'm Marthel Neville. Well, a senior White House official revealing the theme of the president's speech will be building a safe, strong, and proud America. President Trump expected to talk about his accomplishments during his first year in office and the challenges that lay ahead, like reaching a deal on immigration, for which the White House released a framework plan, and it's already getting shot down by the Senate's top Democrat, Chuck Schumer. Rich Edson is live from the White House with more on the president's upcoming address. Rich.
Good afternoon, Arthel. And it is that time of the year when the President of the United States finalizes his State of the Union address. A senior administration official is beginning to preview some of the themes and topics the president will discuss when he addresses Congress and the nation from the House chamber on Tuesday evening. According to a senior administration official, the president will talk about jobs in the economy, infrastructure, a $1 trillion infrastructure proposal, national security, the North Korean threat, trade, and immigration. Ahead of this, the White House and the president have an offer on immigration. They're willing to, they say, protect 1.8 million so-called dreamers, those brought to the United States illegally as children. Their protections will be expiring in March because of actions this administration has taken, and now is leaving that up to Congress. As in exchange for that provision, the president is asking that Democrats agree to fund about $25 billion worth of a border wall and phase out the visa lottery system along with chain migration. The president says and contends that despite what Democrats say, he wants to help keep the dreamers in the country.
Solve the DACA problem. They've been wanting to solve it for a long time. It should have been solved by President Obama. It would have been easier to solve it, especially when he had the House and the Senate. They could have solved it in a day. But they didn't solve it. He didn't solve things. And he did something that he didn't have the right to do. You understand. He did an executive order, and that was no good. And by the way, the court, it wasn't me. The courts were not upholding that executive order. You have to do it through Congress. Yeah. I want to solve the DACA problem.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has rejected that offer. He says the president is simply playing politics with the dreamers. To that, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders has responded over Twitter. She says, quote, "Actually, Senator Schumer, America's legal immigration system has been torn apart for decades by Washington politicians like yourself who prefer open borders and sanctuary cities over law and order and popular common sense reforms." Also from the White House today, the president has just reacted to that suicide attack in Kabul. They packed explosives inside an ambulance, killing 95 people in a hospital. The president called this a despicable car bombing in the attack in Kabul today, and that all countries should take decisive action against the Taliban and the terrorist infrastructure that supports them. Arthel, Eric, back to you.
Rich Edson, I'll take it back here. Thank you. Eric?
Well, Arthel, as we saw, President Trump made his sales pitch at the World Economic Forum, urging global leaders to bring their business to America.
The world is witnessing the resurgence of a strong and prosperous America. I'm here to deliver a simple message. There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again.
And a new Fox poll finds that more voters are rating the economy positively today than they have in nearly 2 decades. And they're giving the White House credit for that. As you can see, nearly twice as many say the Trump administration has made the economy better than made it worse. But then 1/3 see that 34%, they still say that there really isn't much of a difference in the economy. Let's talk more about that. Erin Pike joins us. She is White House correspondent for the Independent Journal Review. You know, Erin, that 34%, the 1/3, is kind of fascinating when you consider the fact that the GDP has risen 2.6%. Consumer confidence is up at a 17-year high. The unemployment is a 17-year low of 4.1%. You got the $1,000 payments by, a zillion companies to their workers, and 76% of the S&P companies say they're beating the estimates. So is the White House, message maybe not getting out?
Well, Eric, I do think the economy is doing obviously really well, but it has been doing well and getting better over the last couple of years. Certainly in the past year, it's been going gangbusters. The stock market is obviously doing really well. the impact of the tax cuts we are already beginning to see. But I think what you see in that 34% is that a lot of these economic indicators aren't actually getting down to rural America. And remember, that is a big part of President Trump's base. So I will be interested to see in this address what he does to connect those things to rural America and what is the next step. What is his vision for actually helping rural America enjoy some of this economic growth as well?
Yeah, the White House says he does plan to talk about these economic issues. So what do you think he should say on Tuesday during the State of the Union about this specifically?
Well, I think what we're going to see is him talk about that in terms of infrastructure. Rich mentioned that he's going to roll out his $1 trillion infrastructure plan, which he's been talking about for the past year. That's going to be important because that is an area in which he can really work with Democrats. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has been kind of cold on infrastructure for the past year. They say that eventually they'll get to it, but this was an important thing on the campaign trail, both for Donald Trump and for Hillary Clinton. Democrats really want to see this happen. Rural America cares about the infrastructure plan, and don't forget, he can connect that to apprenticeships, which will also be a really important thing for rural America because you can obviously create jobs with an infrastructure package of that size.
And talking about jobs, remember shovel-ready jobs? Remember that phrase from a while ago? I mean, these would be shovel-ready jobs, and they would, as you say, would bring a lot to middle America.
Absolutely. And you know, I remember earlier in 2017, there was a big USA Today story about how the West Virginians really want to see an infrastructure package. They care more about that than a number of other things, including seeing what President Trump could do on energy. They really want to see an infrastructure package. And this is a good way for President Trump to reach across the aisle and really try to get some Democratic support.
You know, we have a banner right there. So stocks have gained nearly $6.3 trillion. And the president often touts the fact that the stocks are way up, as you can see. But as you point out, not every American has stocks. Some have 401ks. So, you know, this great resurgence and the great growth does not, at the end of the day, affect all Americans, because you got to be in the stock market in order to benefit from that.
That's right. And actually, the stock market does help a number of foreigners as well. Look, I think he had a big success in Davos over the last couple of days. And that message that he gave, that America first does not mean America alone, was a big deal. And I do think it softened the blow areas if that investment comes.
You talk about investment in the poor areas. The Wall Street Journal has an editorial this weekend. Let me read part of it to you. It says basically that the administration has to keep their eye on that ball. A year after the Obama economists left town, stagnation may be following them back to Harvard. The Obama Democrats put income redistribution ahead of growth and got more inequality and less growth. Mr. Trump and the GOP Congress have made growth a priority, and that's where they need to keep their focus if they want to keep the expansion going. Can they keep the expansion going, number one? And can they keep the focus on that to benefit the folks, as you point out, in rural America especially, who may not have been seeing the major benefits yet?
We did see over the last couple of weeks, over the last week, some economic indicators seem to be slowing down just a little bit. We have yet to see how much the impact of these tax cuts will really benefit the rest of America, if they can keep this economic expansion going or not. I think it's too early to tell on that. As far as income inequality goes, that's going to be a huge issue going into the midterm elections and also into 2020.
And then you've got these, you know, the Trump tax reward rebates, $1.7 billion or so to 1.3 million workers across the country. You know, how could that affect the midterms if you're getting a $1,000 check from your employer and they basically say it's because of the policies of this administration?
It is a great question, and so far we've heard from a number of political analysts that we expect Democrats to take over the House from Republicans in 2018. Don't be so sure. I know a lot of Democrats who are really worried, actually, because the economy is doing so well, and they do credit President Trump with some of that, that Democrats winning the House later this year is no slam dunk.
Wow, you really think so? I mean, remember, you know, Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. I mean, you think that the...
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think we, for so long, have thought that Democrats would pick up the House this November. But I know Democrats are starting to worry that they're not going to be able to get the House because Americans are happy with the economy right now, and they credit the Republicans and really President Trump with that.
But what about all the other stuff? Some of the tweeting and some of the allegations and, everything else we hear about in the president's personality that
Oh, there's no question that
off.
impacts, and there's chaos, and the Russia investigation is ongoing. But despite that, the president has had a couple of good months. The last 2 months have been pretty good. Now, there's always chaos, and that will continue unabated, I am sure. But most Americans care less about that and care a lot more about their pocketbooks.
It's the economy, stupid, said
Right.
Democratic Bill Clinton. So we'll see. Aaron McPike, thank you for your insight, and we'll see how your prediction potentially plays out as we continue through the midterms, of course.
Thank you.
And Fox News Channel will, of course, have live, complete coverage of the President's State of the Union address. As we said, it's Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Brett Baer and Martha, they'll be together anchoring from Washington. Big night on Tuesday for the president and for the Fox News Channel. Arthel?
The Justice Department has recovered missing text messages between two senior FBI officials who were reportedly having an extramarital affair. The two were investigating Hillary Clinton and President Trump, and they exchanged notes critical of the president. Lauren Blanchard is live in Washington with the details. Lauren.
Well, Arthel, the texts were thought to be lost due to a technical glitch, but the DOJ Inspector General says they were able to recover them, the timing of which some lawmakers say is disconcerting. The texts were released by Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley and suggest senior FBI officials were concerned that being too tough on Hillary Clinton for her email use could come back to hurt them if she were elected president. The Attorney General admits there have been some issues, but continues to defend his department.
Sunlight is the best infectant, truly. Truth breeds confidence. A culture of defensiveness is not acceptable. The Department of Justice does not always know what's best. We're not always perfect.
Plus, the texts are boosting Republicans who believe special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into possible Russian collusion during the presidential election is biased because the officials who exchanged the messages, now demoted FBI agent Peter Strzok and reassigned FBI lawyer Lisa Page, both briefly worked on the Russia probe, and many of their texts suggest an anti-Trump sentiment.
Mueller has some ethical issues and ethical conflicts that need to be resolved. And the American people wanting a special counsel into maybe some of the investigations that led to his own criminal investigation related to Russia collusion ought to be very interesting.
The Strzok-Page texts also show back in March of 2016, there was a proposal circulating, at least in some meetings, to name former U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald as a special prosecutor of a possible Clinton email probe. However, Fitzgerald was never appointed, despite Republicans calling for it. Now, some of those fiercest advocates for a Clinton email probe say the texts are renewing suspicion that top officials never planned to pursue charges in the case. Arthel?
Lauren, thank you. And we're going to talk more about all of this with the Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin when he joins us later in the hour.
And we'll be looking forward to that. Well, meanwhile, President Trump is now reacting to a day of horrific bloodshed in Afghanistan. Radical Islamic terrorists of the Taliban strike again, this time leaving nearly 100 people dead in the capital city of Kabul. We'll have details on this horrific attack coming up. And there's new fallout from that bombshell report revealing numerous allegations of sexual misconduct against casino mogul Steve Wynn. We'll have a live report on the Wynn story straight ahead.
Allegations like this are absolutely very disturbing, and I hope that they get the full airing that they deserve.
Fox News has confirmed that Las Vegas casino mogul Steve Wynn is stepping down as Republican National Committee Finance Chairman. The decision comes after a bombshell report in the Wall Street Journal detailing multiple sexual assault allegations against him. Wynn is denying the charges, saying it's a smear tactic created by his ex-wife. Will Carr is live in Los Angeles with the breaking developments. Will?
And Arthel, those allegations are detailed in an extensive investigative piece by the Wall Street Journal. They're both alarming and specific. The Journal reporting that the paper contacted more than 150 people, dozens of whom conveyed a pattern of alleged sexual misconduct by Steve Wynn that allegedly lasted for decades. One of the more damning allegations comes from a manicurist who accuses Wynn of forcing her to have sex with him back in 2005. According to the Journal, Wynn later paid the woman $7.5 million in a settlement. Responding to the story, Wynn tells Fox News in a statement, "The idea that I ever assaulted any woman is preposterous. We find ourselves in a world where people can make allegations regardless of the truth, and a person is left with the choice of weathering insulting publicity or engaging in multi-year lawsuits." He goes on to say the accusations stem from a battle with his ex-wife over a divorce settlement. Now, at the same time, the board of directors of Wynn Resorts tells us that it has formed a special committee to investigate the Journal's claims. The company's stock took a nosedive after the news broke on Friday. Wynn has helped build numerous hotels and casinos in Las Vegas. He took over as finance chairman for the Republican National Committee after President Trump took office, before officially resigning from that position today. Not surprisingly, the allegations are already rippling across the political world. The DNC releasing this statement. In the exact words of RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, "If you stand for treating women well and you stand for the respect of women, you shouldn't take money from somebody who treated women with the absolute highest level of disrespect." And McDaniel releasing her own statement, "Today, I accepted Steve Wynn's resignation as Republican National Committee Finance Chair." So far, we have not heard from President Trump, who considers Wynn a friend. Arthel.
Will Carr. Thanks, Will. Eric?
Arthel, meanwhile, overseas, President Trump condemning this afternoon that deadly attack in Afghanistan. The attack killed at least 95 people and wounded more than 150 others. That's when a suicide bomber, believed to be a Taliban member, drove an ambulance that was packed with explosives, went past a checkpoint in a secure zone in Kabul, saying he'd had to get a patient. Well, the Taliban has now claimed responsibility for this horrendous attack, and of course comes 1 week after the militants of the Taliban stormed that luxury hotel in Kabul, killing 22 people. David Lee Miller following the story from Jerusalem.
Eric, the attack in Kabul is being called an atrocity and a massacre. There is outrage, not only because of the high death toll and great number of injuries, but because an ambulance used to save lives was used to destroy so many. The explosive-laden ambulance made its way past a checkpoint in central Kabul after the driver told police he was taking a patient to a nearby hospital. Soon thereafter, he detonated the device. Most of the dead are civilians, but security forces were also among those killed. The area where the attack took place has government offices, embassies, and many shops. The force of the blast shook the capital.
I was in my shop when a powerful explosion rocked the area. All windows of my shop shattered.
I was sitting in the office. Right after the explosion, it collapsed.
The Taliban has taken responsibility for the blast. Reaction to the attack was swift. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson issued a statement saying, in part, the Taliban's use of an ambulance as a weapon to target civilians represents inhumane disregard for the people of Afghanistan and all those trying to bring peace to the country, and is a violation of the most basic international norms. Exactly 1 week ago, the Taliban killed more than 20 people at a Kabul hotel, including 4 Americans. ISIS is also trying to destabilize the country. On Wednesday, ISIS took responsibility for attacking the aid group Save the Children in the city of Jalalabad. In that incident, 4 people were killed. The latest attack will increase pressure on the Afghan government as well as the U.S. to combat militants in the country. The U.S.-led international military force in Afghanistan, meanwhile, says none of its members were killed in today's blast. Eric?
All right, David Lee, thank you so much. Arthel.
And Derek, more from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who is on his way back to Washington right now after a week-long trip to Europe. Earlier today, Mr. Tillerson slammed Russia for using energy as a political tool, saying the planned natural gas pipeline between Russia and Germany would undermine Europe's energy security. In Poland, Secretary Tillerson also marked International Holocaust Remembrance Day by placing a wreath at a memorial to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943.
Auschwitz-Birkenau was a place of unimaginable horror. On this occasion, it reminds us that we can never be indifferent to the face of evil. As we mark this day in solemn remembrance, let us repeat the words of again.
And meanwhile, earlier this week, Secretary Tillerson accused Russia of responsibility for chemical weapons attacks in Syria.
Meanwhile, Arthel, back here at home, President Trump denying that report that he planned on firing special counsel Robert Mueller. So how will this affect the Russia investigation? I'll talk about it with Republican Congressman of New York, Lee Zeldin. That's straight ahead. Plus, the president's immigration framework, while it sparked a fierce resistance and debate, will have details of the plans that he wants to enact and the reaction to it from Capitol Hill.
We will defend our citizens and our borders. We are also securing our immigration system as a matter of both national and economic security. America is a cutting-edge economy, but our immigration system is stuck in the past.
President Trump is pitching a new immigration plan, offering a pathway for the so-called dreamers to become U.S. citizens in exchange for paying for that border wall and other immigration crackdowns. The plan, though, sparking some fierce reaction on Capitol Hill, as Attorney General Jeff Sessions says it does, though, provide a good framework.
That means welcoming the best and brightest, but banning and deporting gang members, identity fraudsters, drunk drivers, and child abusers, making them inadmissible in our country. This merit-based system would better serve our national interests because it would benefit the American people, which is what this agenda is all about.
So will the Democrats go for it? Ellison Barber in Washington now with the details.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the White House's framework guidance that, quote, indicates what is necessary for the president to sign a bill into law. He added, I am hopeful that as discussions continue in the Senate on the subject of immigration, members on both sides of the aisle will look to this framework for guidance as they work towards an agreement. Before the White House's outline made its way to Congress, a senator involved in bipartisan immigration talks said talks in the Senate would continue regardless of what happens at the White House.
We're not going to be locked down by thinking about what the House might do or what the White House might do. We're going to move on our own.
The White House hasn't released a complete blueprint of their proposal, only a framework, but already there are critics on the left and the right.
They want the ransom for these children to be $25 billion for a wall when we have all the needs that we have for infrastructure in our own country.
If the president serves up 1.8 million people for an amnesty in exchange for $25 billion for a wall, and then reduces the numbers of chain migration that come in, that's the end of his enforcement that he's going to get in his administration unless we come up with another amnesty.
Some key conservatives like Senator Tom Cotton say they like the White House's proposal. Cotton called it generous and humane, a balance between protecting dreamers and securing the border. In the past, some on Capitol Hill said they were frustrated because many felt like they didn't know exactly what President Trump wanted in an immigration proposal. Leader McConnell suggesting in his statement that this is that clarity. Eric?
All right, Ellison, thanks so much. Arthel?
And Eric, for more on this now, we're going to bring in our panel. Jessica Ramirez, managing attorney of the Immigration Assistance Program for Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Newark, and Elizabeth Wydra, the president of the Constitutional Accountability Center. Good to see both of you.
Thank you.
So we're going to jump right in. Gary, I'm glad to have you. Jessica, I'm going to start with you on this one. President's pathway to citizenship, is this a good idea or problematic?
I think it's a good idea. I'm very optimistic that something is going to give for DACA recipients, even though the Trump administration has gone back and forth and ended the program in September. These are people that at this point have lived most of their lives in this country, that speak more English than their native tongue, and for all sense of purposes, they consider themselves American. They live the American lifestyle. They are law-abiding. They wouldn't have an immigration benefit if they were not law-abiding. So I think that it's definitely a good thing. I think that they're a very sympathetic bunch, and Mr. Trump has, from the beginning, has sympathized and says that he wants to do something for them.
Elizabeth, how do you see it?
Well, I think it's important to remember that this could be a very easy fix. The majority of Americans, including 3 out of 4 Republicans, support allowing Dreamers to stay in this country. And it's not surprising given that they are integral members of our community, contributing, really being part of the fabric of the American community. But what we have with the Trump framework, and it's always hard to tell exactly what is going to be Trump's position from one day to the next, is really holding hostage these wonderful young people, these dreamers, in order to cut legal immigration, this family reunification policy that has been derogatorily called chain migration, but for most of the past few decades has just been how immigration works. And for most of us whose families came here as immigrants, we probably came through family reunification policies.
Let's listen to the president on the pathway to citizenship in his own words. Listen.
Over a period of 10 to 12 years, somebody does a great job. They've worked hard. It gives incentive to do a great job, but they've worked hard. They've done terrifically, whether they have a little company or whether they work or whatever they're doing. If they do a great job, I think it's a nice thing to have the incentive of, after a period of years, being able to become a citizen.
All right, Jessica, let me get back to you. So listen, the president's saying, listen, I'll give you pathway to citizenship for nearly 2 million young people in exchange for $25 billion for border security. That's a price tag, by the way, that's substantially more than what Senators Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham considered in their bipartisan bill. Also, how much of the $25 billion is Mexico going to cough up, Jessica?
Well, is he holding them hostage? Is he using DACA recipients as a bargaining tool? Yes. Is he, and he's a businessman, and that's what businessmen do. They exploit and they use in order to get what they want. And I think it is going to be a problematic, but I think everybody's going to have to come in the middle to get what they want and to get something fair to be done.
Compromise? I'll give you this, you give me that?
It is, and that's what's going to have to happen. There has to be a compromise, and I think $25 billion is very hefty. I don't know if $25 billion. I mean, it's not what we want, but we might have to eat some humble pie in order to get DACA and the DACA recipients.
Yeah, and I understand that, but that $25 billion price tag, is that something that some of the president's, critics would say, well, what about Mexico bearing part of that bill, footing part of that bill?
I think Mexico is not going to do that, and I think it is a kick in the gut for a Latina as myself to talk about Mexico on the border when there's another border in Canada. It is going to be problematic, but something has to give. There has to be a compromise.
Elizabeth, so as you were saying a moment ago, President Trump wants to adjust the visa lottery system and limit what you're calling, and I don't want to be offensive, the so-called chain migration, so pardon me if that's offensive to you or anyone, to their spouses and their young children. Do you agree with this, or you seem to have a problem with this proposal? Tell me why.
So certainly we have had a policy of family reunification for the past decades that have allowed people to bring in their siblings, their grandparents. It's really a family values kind of policy. And so to limit it and to change these visa requirements really seems targeted at prohibiting certain people from coming to this country. And it seems... Well, so the visa diversity lottery system often makes it seem as if everyone is equally
right, but the president is saying that the deal with a diversity lottery, it's kind of like, let's pick a number. You get lucky, you get to come to this country, and a lot of bad people, criminals, can, take advantage of that. It's kind of a...
Which is just simply not true. We haven't had that sort of problem. If someone is in the United States and they commit a crime, then they will be deported. If they have committed a crime, they're not eligible.
And you think that system's really
pass the moral test.
It's really in place and it's really working well?
I think it is working pretty well. And, I will say that I think this wall, I thought Mexico was supposed to pay for it, first of all, but also the idea that we're going to have a wall on our southern border is really racist. Why are we trying to keep black and brown people out of this country while the president says we should welcome more people from Norway?
Well, I mean, Jessica, jump in here because the wall happens to be on the border with Mexico. So you know, it could have been, that's just the geography. Jessica?
I have to agree. Well, as Jessica noted, there isn't one on the northern border.
And exactly, I have to agree. It's a kick in the gut, and it is racist. I mean, we're only talking about the Mexican border. What about the Canadian border? Absolutely.
So the president wants the Senate, listen guys and ladies, to deliver legislation following his blueprint by February 5th. That's in 9 days. Is this going to happen, Elizabeth?
I think it's really hard to say. You know, there are a lot of Democrats who are saying we might be willing to give you some money for the wall as, you know, ransom for taking the Dreamers hostage. But I think this limitation on legal immigration might be a step too far for them. And in fact, the Dreamers themselves have come out saying that this is basically a white supremacist ransom note.
So what's the fix here, guys? I mean, unfortunately, we are talking about a lot of brown people, you know, but what is the fix? That's the reality. So how do you fix it without coming across as targeting a certain demographic? Jessica, excuse me.
I think we fix it by the Democrats are going to have to eat some humble pie. We'll have to give in some billions of dollars for a wall. I think the DACA recipients should be able to stay here and have a pathway to citizenship. And I think that the family reunification system that we have should stay in place.
Elizabeth, you get the final word.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, the majority of Americans favor having the Dreamers here, so pass a Clean Dream Act first, and then think about comprehensive immigration reform as the next step.
Okay, well, we will be discussing this in the next couple of weeks, and maybe we'll have you both back. Jessica Ramirez, Elizabeth Wydra, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Arthel, President Trump denying he tried to order the White House lawyer to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller last June. The president says it's just not true. And what about that and those recovered emails from Peter Strzok and Lisa Page? New York Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin next on the continuing investigation. President Trump is pushing back on those reports that he tried to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller last year. Fox News reporting he wanted to do that in June, but was talked out of it by White House counsel Don McGahn and other aides. No confirmation, though, of the New York Times report that McGahn threatened to quit if Mueller was dumped. That caused the president to apparently back off. The president, though, denying that claim. Meanwhile, the Justice Department says it has recovered those months of missing text messages between the two top FBI officials, the alleged lovers Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who were removed from the Mueller investigation. So what do all these developments mean? Joining us now is New York Congressman Lee Zeldin, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, co-chairman of the House Republican Israel Caucus, and he represents the great New York District 1 that stretches from Montauk to kind of going further west here in New York State. Congressman, good to see you. You know, it is said that he tried to fire Don McGahn. Critics are buying that because, you know, Donald Trump has been the boss his whole life. He's run his own company. And the Democrats say that would have crossed the line, but of course, it never happened. Do you buy that story? The president's saying it's not the case.
Well, the president is saying that it's not the case. And if the allegations are not true, then there isn't a story. And even if it was true, it's still not a story because, one, he didn't fire Mueller. He didn't fire McGahn. As a matter of fact, the White House has provided tens of thousands of documents. Their entire team has been showing a willingness to cooperate with the special counsel and to participate in these depositions. So the actual reality that's known, that is a fact, is that they've been cooperating. Mueller hasn't been fired. McGahn is still there.
How do you think this will play out? You served in the military, you know, as a lawyer, judge advocate. What do you see playing out in this investigation that the president does say he's willing to sit down and talk, you know, potentially under oath? The lawyer is now negotiating the terms of that.
Yeah, negotiating the terms are important to make sure that it stays on topic, and you know, the scope of what they discuss should be limited to the scope of the whole reason why the special counsel was created in the first place was tied to the 2016 election, the cybersecurity breaches that took place, the allegations with regards to Russian meddling, the allegation of there being collusion. So there's no reason for it to expand beyond any of that. So it's important to develop that. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the timing of these stories come out right when we're an imminent release of a FISA memo that is going to show abuse that isn't going to make people look very good. So, they might get it out for that reason. Additionally, with everything we're seeing in the texts, as Trey Gowdy says, we're seeing how people are allowing their biases to overcome their better judgment, and we're connecting the dots of all of the ways that improperly how and why the Clinton probe ended and the Trump-Russia probe began. And that's why this story is coming out, is because they don't want to talk about anything that might make the president look good. They want to take him down.
Well, the Democrats are saying that FISA, that report is being used politically by the Republicans, and it is not at all a bombshell. But let me bring you back to something you just said, that this investigation, in your view, should just stay on basically Russia and the election. Do you think that Mueller should go into the financial aspects of the Trump organization, or maybe the alleged Russian shell companies that bought so many Trump condos and this sort of thing? The president has pushed back on that. Should they look at the president's finances, do you think, and the family's finances, too? Is that, to you, an appropriate part of this investigation?
The entire scope of the investigation should be limited to the involvement with Russia, whether it is the cybersecurity piece, Russia meddling. There's been an investigation separately taking place with regards to Election Day itself and protecting the integrity, and these allegations with regards to collusion between the alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. That's what it should be limited to, and anything at all outside the scope of that should not be part of their work, because what we want here is for this to be brought to a conclusion as quickly and as efficiently as possible. This president should not have to spend his entire term in office, constantly facing all of these charges. It's enough that he has to deal with, the Maxine Waterses of the world in Congress, and those in the media who are trying to take him down, and an American public that, for many of them, were calling for his impeachment while his hand was on the Bible. He should not have to deal with, following 16,000 different leads that amount to nothing, unrelated to why this special counsel was created in the first place, for the life of his term, because like many other Americans, and unfortunately not like all Americans, many of us want to see the president successful because we want our country to be successful. That's why the investigation needs to be brought to an end, and brought to an end properly, brought to an end by cooperating the way that they have, so that we can move on to this other stuff. And one last piece about that FISA memo.
Many Americans also, though, want to make sure that there's no wrongdoing. I mean, he's denied collusion, that there's no conspiracy, there's no real coordination with Russia, or there's no coordination or any financial interests that may have swayed any policies, or have certainly swayed the election. Whether it's internet, the internet, whether it's Cambridge Analytica, was there any cooperation which has been denied, and this sort of thing?
And I believe that there was no collusion. From every single thing that I have come in contact with of information, I have not seen any evidence whatsoever that President Trump was colluding with the Russians. So it's outrageous. But you know what? There was a call for this investigation. The investigation takes place. If at the end of the day, Mueller or whoever would have been appointed can bring their investigation to a close and can clear it up, I mean, that's fine, that's great, but let's bring it to an end so that we can focus on governing, on growing our economy and protecting our national security and taking care of our vets.
Finally, the other side of that coin is no Hillary Clinton investigation that's ongoing. And with all that you've seen, and you've seen those texts, I mean, do you think a special counsel should be appointed to investigate Hillary Clinton's server, the emails, and all those questions?
I think that there's actually even more to that, because what we saw was, the Lynch, Bill Clinton, that particular meeting on the tarmac was all sorts of wrong. The way that grossly negligent